for Target 4.2, hosted by UNESCO Bangkok, the Asia and Pacific Regional Bureau for Education. Before we start this session, here is some housekeeping information for you to be aware of. First, the webinar is being recorded for wider sharing later on for you, and occasional photos might be taken throughout this session. 2, we welcome questions throughout this webinar. We would ask that you only use the Zoom Q&A box to write your questions to panelist members. Please identify which panelist member you would like to address your question or questions. On your screen, you should also have access to a chat function where we welcome thoughts, comments, links to resources or program examples. We will monitor the chat during the webinar and we will bring your input into the discussion. 3, at the end of the webinar, attendees will be redirected to the exit survey. Please help us by completing a short evaluation. And finally, if you would like to know more about what we discussed or access resources, please visit the UNESCO Bangkok website as shown on the slide and copied into the chat box for you to access it. In today's session, we welcome countries experts to share with us their country's effort in costing and financing of the SDG Target 4.2, as well as hearing from UNESCO colleague on strengthening cost and finance in line with Target 4.2. Before doing so, please let me introduce you to today's moderator, Nini Tong, Program Specialist in Policies and Planning for UNESCO Bangkok. Nini will provide a summary of yesterday's session in regards to early childhood care, education rationale, costing and financing. Following yesterday's summary, we will go straight into the panelist presentation. Nini, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gigi. Thank you, colleague. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Before we start for the second day, shall we have a photo section? What do you think of? So before we start for the recap for the day one and also proceeding for the presentation, maybe we would like to get the photo section for all the participants. So if we will kindly request all the panel member and also attendants to open their video, and then my colleague Job can take a quick photo. So thank you very much. Shall we do that? Yeah, thank you.
1, 2, 3, 4. Another one. 1, 2, 3. Smile. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, John. Thank you. So let's start moving towards the day 2 of our interesting section about this our seminar. And as my colleague Gigi mentioned, what I would like to do is today, I would like to start upon the recap of what we had discussed yesterday discussion. Also, we have a very enriching and also very interesting discussion yesterday, I'm sure. So let me recap quickly, and then of course the day 1 would start with the opening remark from our directors in the UNESCO Bangkok, and Mr. Shiguru Aoyagi. And then first thing is he highlighted the need for the significant investment in ECC. This is the first message he passed it to us. And also he emphasized that the quality pre-primary service and the investment in the early life of the children can provide significant educational, social, and economic benefit. But what he highlighted is, however, the investment is low compared to the other sectors. That's and then also the benchmark call for the expenditure of the at least 1% for country GDP and or at least 10% for public education expenditure. Then it's noted that the Asia Pacific Regional Effort and Commitment has been made through 2018 Kathmandu Statement of Action and also 2016 Putrajaya Declaration. What our collective commitment has been made to achieve this. But he recalled that many countries in the Asia Pacific region, the overall expenditure or ECC as a percentage of GDP is greatly falling far below the international benchmark. This is one of the reasons what we would like to organize this similar kind of this seminar to really encourage and also sensitize and to make awareness to our policy maker, planner, to providing the evidence-based policy decision to really to improve the significant investment in ECC also. And particularly, he mentioned that in the COVID-19 will severely affect the investment and funding opportunity for that sector, which we need to do. That our opening remark from our director, there's a presentation from my colleague Diane from IEP, and she shared a very interesting case study from other part of the world, Gambia. And her presentation focused on the 4 key questions about what was spent on ECCE, who is financing ECCE, what is the prevailing ECCE financial structure of that country, and is current ECCE financing pattern equitable, efficient, and suitable also. So one point, the message we got from her presentation is the lack of data is one of the key challenges to come up with the evidence or convince policymakers to increase the investment in ECCE. Then she also introduced situation of ECCE in Gambia, where the private sector dominant provision and also while households are paying main bill of their ECCE sector also. And then also ECC portion is 0.8% of GDP, but only 4% of education budget highlighted more need to be invested. So that's highlighted the significant investment again needed for the ECC sector also. And then there are some takeaways. She highlighted the country has achieved relatively high ECC coverage with a little government financial support. That's an interesting one. And also the household, as I mentioned, bear disproportionate share of costs, rising sustainability and equity issue, and also low level of school readiness suggests also inefficient use of existing resources and inadequate level of ECCs to make it more effective also. And then also building it better require sharp increase for ECCE, both in public and private, to better use for resource, which link to the low readiness for the school readiness for this ECC sector also. And then again, the introducing simulation financial model, it is a useful tool for assessing and testing the financial and human, technical and feasible for alternative policy options. And then again, mention about data challenge also. It was followed by the presentation made from Mr. Masaya for regional model on costing SDG for Asia and the Pacific, and that his presentation, the Masaya briefly explained about current status of education finance in Asia and the Pacific region, and also introduce and explain regional effort for this education financing funded by the Korean Funding Trust following the regional costing model developed by Sun regional example. And also he mentioned the regional average Asia met neither to two public, the two key indicator, public expenditure, education expenditure benchmark, and also say that spend at least 4% of the GDP and at least 50% of total education expenditure also. Out of there, only 9 out of 48 Asia Pacific country in this region reach this education benchmark. So which is a thing which we need to further discuss also. And also to further reinforce, of course, to increase the investment in education, he introduced the various initiatives of global, regional, and national level for elaborating what's made for the regional costing model for, which is supported by the, again, Korea Funded project also. So then he highlighted the purpose of this model is to estimate the cost and financial requirement for the specific target and various situations, especially for the target 4.1, 4.2, and 4.5. And then also then he mentioned that, 829 billion US dollar will require in this region, 2030 regional level, mostly for primary education and particularly focused on East and Northeast Asia also. And the third regional level average, 75% of the GDP need to be spent in education. And he came out with different scenario and also mentioned that it required number of teachers will increase to improve student teachers interaction, and also cost will be increased. So that's different scenario he has been introduced also. And then lastly, in the yesterday discussion, what we do is we have made this the presentation from our colleague Yuki from the Global Education Monitoring Team, and she shared the work of Global Education Monitoring Team initiative for focusing on global level modeling for funding need for SDG4, especially for low and lower middle income country, and answering the cost of achieving the headline for the SDG4 targets, ensuring universal pre-primary, primary and secondary education by 2030 for low and lower middle income country also. And then she mentioned that the growth for the low income country has gone below the regional benchmark, the global benchmark, and also declining also. So that again, also that particular country, she mentioned the population that country are increasing, so which means there is an increased projection for the pupil also. Then it will double the number of pupil by 2025 in lower income country and triple the number in the 2030. So, and then also she mentioned that pre-COVID, the annual financing get to reach SDG 4 by 2030 was expected to grow from the $339 billion to the 148 billion. So, which estimated from the simulation model also. And also pre-primary financing will be the 6 billion in 2015 to 76 billion in 2030 also. And then also if we continue to do that, pandemic may increase financing get by 30%. And if we take into account of GDP fall 4.5% and aid to education fall by 12%, we may need more and more financing get will be required. So, and then also she mentioned that, in relation with it, the GEM thing has been produced the thematic paper, and it could be downloaded. So it's a kind of wide. Yesterday we had diverse range of the presentation has been made from mainly at the regional. We learn from the other part of the region and the global level also. Followed by this 3 presentation and Q&A discussion. What we do, we have make a kind of the section for asking our participant about the 2-3 question, 3 question about what would be the major challenge for developing and sustaining a costing model for ECCE, and also how can we coordinate and dealing with the many stakeholders in ECC in order to what will be the proposed mechanism to set up this country thing if we would like to develop the costing model, and also how COVID-19 pandemic had affecting for this ECC sector, and then particularly for availability of funding of the sector, how if we would like to estimate, if we would like to project for future planning, how should we do this? So that we get a various input, and also the sharing a thought and idea from our participant, which we will share with you later also. So there is a kind of brief recap for the day 1, and then without further ado, maybe I would like to introduce to our presenter. So today we have 3 presenters, from the sharing the particularly regional experience to what the also country experience also. So these 3 presenters will be the first one is my colleague Christy. She's the program officer of UNESCO Bangkok, and followed by the Ms. Yelena the Tan from deputy head of the main department of formation of preschool education from Uzbekistan, and also the Ms. Moon, head of the Director Office of Planning and Coordination from Korea Institute for Childcare and Education, KFIT from Korea. So this followed by the 3 presentation, we will also have a kind of Q&A section, and also brainstorming section will be followed also. So with this, allow me to introduce my colleague Christy for her presentation. So you most probably, a lot of you might know my colleague Christy. She is the program officer responsible for UNESCO Bangkok regional program on early childhood care and education, and also inclusive education, including children with disability and mother tongue language multilingual education also. She being also the coordinator for the Asia Pacific Multilingual Education Working Group. We call it MLE Working Group or coordinator as well. And she holds the MSc from the National University of Singapore also. So with this, Christy, floor yours.
Thank you, Nini. Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Nini, for your kind introduction. My presentation will be building from the presentation from yesterday, and we'll dive into the national costing model to support member states in costing and planning Ecc sector. Next slide. So these are the outline of my presentation. My presentation will briefly review the current status of ECE in the Asia Pacific region, introduce regional efforts to expand quality ECE, then introduce our project and national costing model for SDG 4.2, and discuss next steps to increase financial investment in ECE in the region. Next slide. As you can see on the graph on the left side, since 2000, participation in pre-primary increase in all sub-regions in the context of Asia-Pacific region. East Asia and the Pacific region, which is a red line in the graph, shows the highest increase by 33%. However, South and West Asia and Central Asia regions are still struggling to offer pre-primary education for their children. Next slide. As speakers from yesterday mentioned, ECE remains as a chronically underfunded subsector in the Asia-Pacific region. The Kathmandu Statement of Action encourages member states to increase financial investment in equitably and comprehensive quality ECCE through recurrent budgets, with the goal of gradually increasing public expenditure on ECCE services using international benchmark, which are at least 1% of the country's GDP and or at least 10% of public education expenditure as a guide and providing sustainable and efficient public funding for supporting the expansion and quality of ECCE programs. But as you can see from this graph, only Mongolia and Vietnam and Maldives are meeting the minimum benchmark, and many countries in the region face challenges related to insufficient government allocation, lack of sustainable financing, and lack of coordination among stakeholders. These challenges are not unique to Asia. Of course, they are found everywhere in the world, that as we hear from yesterday in Gambia. Next slide. So according to the OECD statistics, it is not only government not investing in ECCE sector. Donors are not also spending less than 1% of its ODA on pre-primary education, which is the lowest level across the region. As you can see from the figures, compared to post-secondary and primary sector, ECE sector is getting really the minimal amount the budget, and compared to other region, Asia region receives the least funding for ECE sector. Next slide. So thanks to active partners such as UNICEF and ARNIC, there have been strong regional efforts to expand access to quality ECE to all children. Starting with the first regional policy forum in South Korea, UNESCO have co-organized second and third regional policy forum in ECCE in Malaysia and Nepal to regionally contextualize SDG 4.2 targets and build momentum to increase investment in ECCE sector. We are currently under discussion with the Uzbekistan government to organize a World Congress on ECCE in 2022. Next slide. So the Asia-Pacific Regional Policy Forum and ECCE have provided a platform for ministers and high-level officials to share their experiences, knowledge, and discuss strategies to expand access to inclusive quality ECCE. The Putrajaya Declaration had 9 action plans to operationalize and monitor SDG 4.2 targets. When we met again for the third policy forum in Nepal, member states agreed on 5 priority areas to accelerate the progress towards achieving SDG 4.2. Increasing investment was one of the priority areas. Next slide. So meeting this commitment will be difficult to achieve given the stagnating trend in providing adequate support to ECE. Thus, UNESCO Bangkok launched a project funded by Korean Funds in Trust to explore alternative or innovative mechanisms and partnerships for financing ECCE sector as a critical solution to achieve SDG target 4.2. But during the development of the guideline, we have realized many countries in the region are lacking capacities to conduct a sectoral analysis of ECE to understand the basis and also and assess gap in ECCE financing between current resources and those needed to achieve the SDG 4.2 targets. Next slide. So with this realization, we took a step back and launched the project to support countries to assess financial gaps to achieve SDG 4.2 targets. Next slide. As part of this project, we have developed a regional costing model, which was presented by Masaya yesterday. And then we we customized the regional model to the national level. The project selected 3 low middle income countries, namely Bhutan, Cambodia, and Kiribati from different sub-regions. Our model is developed for a capacity development and advocacy tool, rather than use as a sector planning tool, which requires much more detailed data and analysis. With our costing model, we want to bring all key stakeholders who are financing Ecc sector to identify the bottleneck and discuss ways to increase investment. As many participants point out during our Jamboard session yesterday, we hope our model could support dialogue between different ministries and also between statisticians and the policymakers to make evidence-based policy planning and decision. Next slide. So for our costing model, first we use data sources from UIS, World Bank, EduStat, OECD Stat, information available online. And then we reached out to all 3 countries early this year to collect the additional national education statistic document. Similar to regional costing model, we put ECE statistics such as school age population, enrollment, number of existing resources, economic conditions, and national education system as inputs, and set targets using SDG 4.2 indicators and national targets. Then using the model, we could get estimation result of school age population, enrollments, human and physical resources needed, financial requirements, and expenditure framework. I would like to highlight that the projection summary sheet under this model have a user-friendly data visualization of projection results so that people like me who are not good with the numbers can understand easily. And also government officials from Ministry of Education can print out and start initiating a discussion with the Ministry of Finance or other ministries. So it'll be much easier tool to use it as an advocacy. Next slide. So during the model development, the COVID-19 pandemic has taken place. Thus, we added a module to estimate financial impact of COVID-19 on ECCE provision. We came up with the 3 different stages. Epidemic period from 2020 to 2021. It may last longer depending on the situation, how it goes. The remediation period from 2022 to 2024, and then post-pandemic period from 2025 to 2030. These are our assumption at the moment, but the user can set the assumption and change the COVID-19 stages in the scenario settings. So in the estimation, we estimated 10% of total unit costs are additionally needed for academic period measures. Next slides. So I will focus on Cambodian example as we were able to collect the most data from Cambodia, which gives more accuracy to the model. So according to Cambodia Education 2030 roadmap, the national target is to increase the access to 51.8%. And then the government expenditure for pre-primary education as percentage of government educational expenditure is 9%. Without any additional intervention and increased investment, as you can see on the right side, the model projects by 2030, Cambodia will be able to provide ECCE only to 40.7% of the children, which is lower than the national and SDG 4.2 targets. So in order to meet the national and SDG 4.2 targets, Cambodia needs to increase its investment on Ecc sector. Next slide. So in order to meet national and SDG 4.2 access targets, Cambodia needs to have more school buildings and pre-primary teachers to provide inclusive quality pre-primary education for all children. Compared to 2019, Cambodia needs to build 2,600 pre-primary schools to meet national targets, and 13,300 pre-primary schools to meet SDG 4.2 target, which is a very steep increase. And also the pupil-teacher ratio at the moment is very high. So the national target is to decrease the ratio to 1 to 25. So the pupil-teacher ratio will be decreased over time to ensure the quality of learning. But in order to provide quality CCE, Cambodian government needs to recruit more teachers, meet this target. It is projected about 4,000 additional teachers are needed to meet national targets, and 21,977 teachers are needed to meet SDG 4.2. So again, it has a huge impact on the financing gap. Next slide. So additional infrastructure and teacher will translate into additional recurrent cost and capital investment. It is projected that financial requirements would rise to US 133.5 million to meet the national target, and US $306.6 million for SDG 4.2 target in 2030. So similar to regional costing model, which was presented yesterday, if the goal is to provide free 1 year of compulsory pre-primary education, the government needs to drastically increase its spending on pre-primary education. As you can see on the far right graph, the government will face $205.2 million financial gap to provide this, which is 100 times bigger than the national target. So the projection model gives the magnitude of financial gap in reaching SDG 4.2 target for Cambodia. Next slide. So as I explained earlier, the model includes the COVID-19 module to calculate the impact. During the COVID-19 pandemic and also during the remediation period, cost to Ecc sector will be increased to accommodate the new sanitation facilities, additional training for remediation measures, and also including the re-enrollment strategy. So in order to meet national target, the financial gap increases further to achieve national and SDG 4.2 targets, which means government needs to spend more money. Given the estimations, the government lose national income due to the low GDP growth rate, the budget to ECCE would be decreases, and the shortfall would be $10.3 million for national targets, and $332.6 million for reaching SDG 4.2 targets in 2030. Next slide. So this slide kindly summarizes, it shows a summary of financial shortfall if the government allocates 2.5% of GDP to education and 9% of educational expenditure to pre-primary as targeted in National Education Plan. The government needs to increase its expenditure to achieve both national targets, which is 51.8% for gross enrollment rate, and SDG 4.2 target, which is 100%, to compensate for financial shortfall, especially for providing free pre-primary education. The right graph shows the ideal line of government expenditure to education and pre-primary to achieve each target. The projected national financial target is shown in the intersection of purple lines, which is below every 4 lines. So to achieve ECCE target, for example, if the government can allocate 4% of GDP to education in 2030, so you can look at the red box there, the government needs to allocate 5.8% which is a national target, or 66.9%, which is the national target after the COVID, or 17.2% to meet the SDG 4.2 target before COVID, or 20.2% to reach SDG 4.2 target after COVID of government education expenditure to pre-primary. Next slide. So as speakers from yesterday also highlighted, I would like to reiterate the importance of data. The projection model is based on the baseline data as inputs. So without comprehensive data, the calculated projection and scenario will not be reliable. So adequate and quality data are essential on this exercise. Thus, strengthening the data collection capacities to monitor SDG 4.2 indicators are the key. In order to address financial challenges, the governments and other key stakeholders need to identify most disadvantaged area and population at regional and national level, then prioritize targeted financial investment for marginalized children. We need to further explore and adapt alternative and innovative financing policies and mechanism to support government's limited fiscal capacity. As you can see, the government will be faced a huge financial gap, and I think everyone have to work together on this. So develop costing and financing tools with the reliable national data and apply estimation result to policy development, and sensitize all relevant stakeholders to compensate national income loss and increase educational costs during epidemic and remediation period of COVID-19. As a way forward, depending on how COVID-19 situation goes, we would like to organize a national workshop in these 3 countries to present different projection scenarios and discuss how we can increase investment for ECCE with the different ministries. So that's it for my presentation, and thank you for listening. Over to you, Nini.
Thank you. You're well under your time slot of 20 minutes. Now that's still for one and half minute. Let me fill it. So first of all, thank you very much for reinforcing our commitment and also reminding our colleague and partner and all the participant stakeholder for the again, also you mentioned about the need for the further investment in this Ecc sector, which has a highly return. We can make it from different aspects also. And also thank you very much for sharing the information about how UNESCO initiated or supporting or meeting this commitment, how we would like to provide our member state to support in this way, and and then sharing that this the kind of introducing the UNESCO the ECC simulation model with the country case study for the Cambodia also. As Christy mentioned, it is a kind of, I would like to remind again, this is a kind of the advocacy and policy dialogue too. And then you will see that what Christy present is you will see different illustration and different policy message you can find out from this kind of the evidence-based policy, the dialogue too. So we would like to welcome other members. Now, right now, as Christy mentioned, we have 3 countries, it's already on board, and we would like to get it as part of our capacity development program. We also would like to bring much more our member state to be joint hand together to really having the skill to making this in the regional model, and also coming to achieving this the commitment we have made in the Putrajaya and also Kathmandu declaration also. Again, also as Christy mentioned, the COVID-19 has made a significant impact for affecting our investment in education sector, but particularly in the ECC. So let's work out together also. So with this, once again, Christy, thank you very much for sharing the excellent presentation. And sure, there are a lot of colleagues, the participants who would like to have this question and clarification. Let us do it in after Q&A section. Now, without further ado, let me introduce another presentation. Now we are getting down more toward the country experience. So another speaker, which I would like to introduce, is Madam Yelena Tans. So she is the deputy head of the main Department of Ministry of Preschool and Education from Uzbekistan also. So Ms. Yelena Tan is currently deputy head of the main department of the Ministry of preschool education for Uzbekistan, overseeing policy making and strategic development for the preschool education subsectors. Prior to joining this ministry in 2017, Yelena has a CEO of DGB Research and Consulting Fund and consulting company based on Tashkent. Her overall experience in DGB Group spent 10 years. Earlier on that, she worked in the Malaysian-German JV joint venture in Kuala Lumpur, where she pursued a career in the field of the asset management also. So Ms. Yelena has experience in research, management, consulting, HR, human resource management also. So in 2007, she led an international team to conduct an extensive analysis of education sector in Uzbekistan and also to develop strategic recommendation for the government. So Madam Yelena graduated from Tashkent Institute for Oriental Study in 2004 and hold a master's degree with honor in international relations. She also has the retaining certificate in the preschool education and also pursuing her PhD degree in education management. And also she is the author of the number of publications. So over the course of her career, she successfully completed various training in such as the HR management, market research, analysis and marketing, etc. also. So Madam Yelena, floor is yours. So let us hear from our Uzbekistan experience. Thank you. We cannot hear you. Job, right? Ms. Yelena, are you muting or? It's okay. We can hear you, Ms. Yelena. We are not hearing you. Maybe while we are waiting for the Ms. Yelena to fix the, maybe shall we invite Madam Mu? What do you think, Christy?
Yes, I think it's better. Yeah.
So let us do it this way while we are waiting.
Oh, is microphone working, Yelena? Sorry, I heard some noise.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Yeah. Okay. Let's go with the Korea first.
Thank you. So while we are waiting there's a little bit of technical glitch in the presentation from presenter from Uzbekistan. So while we are waiting, they are fixing for this technical glitch. Maybe let me invite the presentation from Korea, Ms. Moon Yong Moon, the head of the Director Office of Planning and Coordination from Korea Institute for Childcare and Education, we call it KAIS, from Korea. So Ms. Moon is the Director of the Office of International Research and Data Analysis from the Korea Institute for Childcare and Education in the Republic of Korea, KAIS. Before working in the KAIS, Dr. Moon was the head of the Early Childhood Education Division, Graduate School of Education, Jeju University in Republic of Korea as well. So Dr. Moon currently serves as a vice chair and also national coordinator of the OECD, ECCE network, and a council member of the, we call it PECRE, Pacific Early Childhood Education Research Association. So she also served as the expert committee member from 2009 to 2010 UNESCO World Forum on ECC representative, and then also for representing Asia and the region, and also steering committee member of the ANEC, Asia Pacific Network for the Early Child Care also. So her recent project included developing the midterm plan for the early childhood education and care for the Korea for 2022-2027, and the analysis and consulting of the use of space in the ECC setting in the COVID-19 circumstance and more and more. So she earned her PhD in early childhood care from the University of Illinois at the Urban campaign in USA, and also hold a bachelor degree in the education from the Seoul National University. So Madam Moon, floor is yours. Thank you very much. And sorry about that, yeah.
Good afternoon. I am Mugyang Moon from the Korea Institute of Child Care and Education, which is a national research institute under the Prime Minister's office. It is my great pleasure to speak on the financing issues in early childhood education and care in Korea. I would like to express my sincere thanks to the UNESCO Bangkok for organizing and arranging this important webinar. Next slide, please. I would like to explain about the current status of early childhood education and care in Korea. You can see in the slide, from the 0 to 2 years, the participation rate from the total participation from the 0 to 5 is 73.1%. And then if you look at the 3 to 5 years old children, it's over 90%. Even 0 to 2, as you can see, Korea has very high participation rate. Under 1 year old is 0 to 20%, and then 1 year old 81%, 2 year old is 91%. This is very high for the youngest children. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the participation rate in Korea increased from 2012 until now. We reached over 90%. This is only for the 3 to 5 years old children, and with the initiation of the NURI curriculum in 2012, and also expanded to 3 to 4 year old in 2013. If you look at the next graph, the ratio of the pupils to teachers in the kindergartens and then the primary and secondary school from 2000 to until 2020, if you look at the blue line for the pre-primary kindergarten education, it's about the one teacher. The ratio is a 1 to 11, so it's quite low. But I would like to mention this is for the as an average ratio, but the private kindergartens, it's slightly higher than this one. Next slide, please. So this is the financing in early childhood education in Korea is quite complicated because of the split system of early childhood education and care. We have two, for the early childhood education, governed by overseen by the Ministry of Education, and child care overseen by the Ministry of Health and Welfare. And then, as you can see, children's age is overlapping 3 to 5. So the kindergarten children can go to kindergarten, and then also 3 to 5-year-old children can go to the child care centers as well. So the legal base and also the curriculum is integrated since 2012 with the NURI curriculum, and we revised the NURI curriculum, the play children-centered, child-centered, and free play advocated based NURI curriculum in 2019. And then the teacher training is also splitted. And then quality monitoring, we only consolidated the evaluation, the monitoring indicators in 2017, but still it is, the implementation is done separately. Next, please. Next slide. So the current government of the President Moon Jae-in, the catchphrase is every child is everyone's child. So he announced the national agenda on early childhood care and education in 2017. As you can see, that there are many agenda. We have about the 100 national agenda, but this is only focused on the early childhood education and care. So first, there are two most important the national agenda, which is the strengthening government accountability in securing the NURI subsidies. And because of we have a shortage of NURI subsidy since 2014, so the government strive towards secure the funding for the NURI curriculum. And another one is we have a high proportion of profit-making private provider services. So we want to increase the participation rates in public institutions, both in kindergarten and child care centers, up to 40% by 2022. And another one is, if you look at the number 5, we want to also close the gaps in quality between the kindergartens and child care centers in terms of teacher salary and teacher qualifications, and then the facility quality and more. So all these, I'm conscious of time. So these kind of things has impact on the financing early childhood education and care. Next slide, please. So we have of course, we have early childhood care and education plan by 2 different ministries every 5 years, based on the indicated by law, Early Child Education Act, and then another one, Child Care Act. Because of the presidential term, the government term is 5 years, so every 5 years we made a national plan, a midterm plan for the early child education and care. If you see the slide, which is on your right hand, it is the early child education, the innovation plan. Another one is child care policy. Based on this midterm plan, we estimate the budgets to implement all these midterm plan. So, and also, in order to plan this midterm, the national plan, we have a robust national survey for every 3 years for early child education sector, every 5 years for education sector, every 3 years for the child care sector. So based on the survey results, we make plan the policy, we make a policy planning, and then also estimate the budget. Next slide, please. Let me go over a brief history of government subsidies on ECC. I do have a reason to show this a brief history, because I would like to highlight the free education and care for Korea since 2012 and 2013. It doesn't come at once. It took more than 10 years. As you can see in the slide, September 1999, the free early child education care only for 5-year-old, just before the formal schooling, for 5-year-old of low-income families in rural areas. We started with the free education initiative. And then we move on to we gradually expanded to the lower age. In 2004, subsidies for 3 to 4-year-old on sliding scale, and then another one, 0 to 2, and then the full day program for kindergarten for the low-income children in 2009. Finally, 2012, we initiated the free education for all children, all 5-year-old children. Also, I must highlight that Korea is probably the only one provide the free child care for 0 to 2, youngest one for 0 to 2. So expanded to the free education to all 3 to 4-year-old in 2013. Next slide, please. So as you can see, since 2014, Korea reached the 1% of the GDP investment into early childhood care education. So this is above the average of OECD, the recommended the GDP percentage recommended by the OECD, which is 0.8. So since 2014, we maintain over 1% of GDP. Next, please. So let me introduce, this is a bit complicated. Early child education and care financing system in Korea is a bit different. We have two different structures. As you can see, for the funding for early child education and for which is kindergarten, and the child care derives from different sources. For early child education, government subsidies have been overseen by the local office of education since 2008. Prior to this, responsibility for early child education funding was divided, which is the central government offered early child education subsidies and private kindergarten subsidies, while the local governments offered the funding in the form of subsidy to cover teachers' labor cost, teacher salary, and operating expenses, education environment improvement fees, and then public kindergarten facilities. Since 2008, most of funding for kindergartens is covered by the local finance, primarily through the financial grant for local education. Financial grants for local education are funded through the internal tax grants and the educational tax grants, as you can see in the table in the slide. Local Office of Education also collect metropolitan city and provincial tax contributions, as well as general contributions from the local governments. Importantly, within local education financing, early child education is not given a separate, distinct funding stream. Rather, funding for kindergarten is drawn from the total financial grants, which I mean by we need to share with the primary and secondary schools. So it seems a block grant for education. On the other hand, childcare finances are derived from both the central government about the 50% and local government about the 50%. Among these local government, as you can see in the slide, with the municipality covering 25%, and then also local city or the county government covering another 25%. Next slide, please. So the funding scheme is quite different. What would be the priority for the Korea in financing? As you can see, in relation with the SDG 4.2, Korea made since 2018, Korean government under the leadership of the Ministry of Environment, Korea made KSDG, and we included this, another indicator, which is a national indicator. We have a global indicator and then the thematic indicator. As you can see, the national indicator is because of the high proportion of the profit-making private services. We try to increase the participation rate in public early childhood services. So current in 2018, it was 24%, but by 22, we want to increase up to 40%. So try to expand the financing, the funding for this area. Next, please. So as a result, we try to expand the building, the kindergarten facilities, and then also the child care facilities. And we have many different strategies to increase the participation rate in public kindergartens and child care centers. As you can see, by 2020, you see the compared to the 2017, 2020, we increased about the slightly higher by the public 29 to almost 30%. And then the public, for child care sector, it was about 13% in then 2017, but now it's 20%, over 20% in general. So still a long way to go, but we make gradual progress. And then next picture, you can see that the early childhood fee subsidy by age of this year, you can see from the 0 to 2, Korean government provide heavy subsidies. And then for age 3 to 5, it is the universal, it's a flat rate of the 26,000 Korean won. It's about 20 to 250 US dollars per child per month. And also everything is per child per month from 0 to 2. And then this is only for 4 to 5 hours. If we have 24 hours the services for the kindergarten and child care centers, that is about the 50%. The government provide 50% on the top of this amount. They provide 50% more. Next slide. Oh, sorry. Then we have about on the early childhood education and care about 4 trillion Korean won, which is only for newly subsidy. It only come from the central government. We do have other the government subsidies as well. And then as a total on education, 71.2 million Korean won. And then the total this is about percentage annually increase 6%. And total national budget is about 558 trillion won. So it's we reached at least almost mostly 10% of entire education budget on early child education. Next slide, please. So let me address some challenges in financing in Korea. Because as you can see that because of the split system, split structure of the financing and governance structure, it is very difficult to provide integrated, the data and also different financing scheme and some overlaps and then some blind spot. So this is a problem. And then another one is because of the high proportion of profit-making private providers, the public transparency always is an issue. So finally, last year, the government initiated a private kindergarten audit system we call the K-Edifine, which is already implemented in the primary and secondary school. So it lowered down to the private kindergartens as well. So still in the process of adjusting and making adjustment. And then another one is we have a NURI subsidy. As I mentioned, since 2014, we have some shortage of the NURI subsidy, but we don't have this legal base on the Early Childhood Education Act. So so we have a temporal by the law. We have just the temporary special account on the NURI subsidy from 2017 to for the first time 2019, and then extended to until the end of this presidential term. So we have to find another way to support this NURI subsidy after 2022. So another one is with this NURI subsidy, we provide use this voucher system. This is demand side the financing. So we need to know about the effectiveness and efficiency of this voucher system, because the parents are not happy with this NURI. I mean that they are happy on a certain level, but the unit cost is much higher than the government subsidy. So need to make increase this the NURI subsidy at the unit cost. Next slide, please. Some issues is some need to probably it's not only for Korea, so it's also for the other countries as well. So need to make balance between the parental leave benefits and the early childhood services. Another one is, as I just mentioned, the demand side and supply side, the making balance between the Korea is a strong case for this for the representing the demand side of financing, but need to make a balance in order to secure the quality. And another one is universal and targeted. We made a universal, but still how many hours of provision? It is quite an issue. It has been, and also still an issue for Korea, how many hours it would need to cover. And another one is, so we have a strict targeted criteria. I didn't mention, but we had many the subsidies for the multicultural families and the low-income families, and also the special needs children. And all these need to have some specific targeting criteria. And another one is, as I mentioned, it is very difficult to balance the quality and then the access. So next slide, please. Some of the COVID-19 impact on the financing ECC, as you mentioned, I don't have time to go over this, but the next slide, please. So obviously Korea has a high proportion of profit making private. So, and then the government provide subsidies for private and childcare centers and kindergartens. They spend for kindergarten sector $76 million US. They compensate tuition fees during the closure of the services, so they can provide the teacher salaries in private kindergartens and childcare centers. Another one, we have many trust with the distance education program. So with the educational broadcasting system we call the EBS prepares, we also spend some special trust fund to develop the TB programs and many teacher training programs, and also what we call the emergency childcare services in kindergartens and childcare centers. We also provide some staff salaries as well there. Next slide, please. So some key takeaways for other countries I would like to mention is the political will really matters. Korea has a primary and secondary school, make the middle school free, and then we made the high school. In order to making high school free, the government chose they place higher priority on early childhood education, and then we were able to make early childhood education free in 2012. And then, as I mentioned, for the youngest children, 0 to 2, it is very rare in the wide world. We made free education and care, which is reflecting the societal needs to promote the population issues, to increase population. This is, I would like to highlight, the financing also needed to relate to the societal values and the social needs for Korea's case. I think it's for other countries as well. And another one for which I could think of innovative for Korea is we value education very high in Korea. So we mandate allocation of budget to primary, to pre-primary, to the secondary school education. We didn't include higher education. So to secure durable funding, 20%, at least minimum 20% of total domestic internal tax grant is allocated educational budget. So this is, nobody could touch for this funding budget, only for education. Of course, this is, as I mentioned, this is a block grant. So we have to compete with the primary, pre-primary need to compete with the primary and secondary school, but this is only for education, so 20%. Another innovative, this is some kind of also ambivalent values of the financing strategies. In the beginning of the early childhood education in Korea, we try to expand the facilities, kindergarten, childcare centers. So we utilize private funding sources from the service providers as well. So thus we have to public and then private partnership also quite effective in Korea. It has been. Now we place a lot of funding to private institutions. So we initiated all this system in the end. Another one is, as a Nuri subsidy, as I mentioned, we have a special account for early childhood education. So this is a special funding for early childhood education, specifically only for early childhood education. This is one way to promote early childhood education and financing, I think. Another one is, as I mentioned, we have a split system. In more coordinated, integrated financing system really matters. As I mentioned, we financing policy also strictly based on the database and the research-based planning, because we conduct a nationwide survey every 3 years for childcare, every 5 years for education, early childhood education. This makes it really different, and we not only for this national survey, every year we conduct, the KFIT conduct more than 80 the policy projects, so which all had a lot of the financial, related to the budgetary planning. I think I used my time. So thank you for listening. I'll be happy to respond to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moon. Thank you for sharing the experience of how Republic of Korea has steadily, strengthened and also expand the Ecc sector. So that's a very interesting, fascinating to learn. Also, as you mentioned about the slogan on every child, every child, say every one child, under this fascinating slogan, I mean, how Korea has been systematically advancing to achieve the SDG food target, and you sharing the very inspiring story about, how this long way to come, it's not just coming out right away, you have been, I mean, steadily and systematically preparing to achieve that level of as of today also. And also I would like to highlight one point very interesting, that you make it this mandatory, the budgetary proportion, certain portion of the education budget to be the early child. This is one of the very interesting, and I would say the experience, or the point we should learn from, also it should be learned from other countries as well. So once again, thank you very much, Dr. Moon, for very inspiring and very interesting sharing your country experience. So with this, let us move to come back to the Uzbekistan. Madam Yelena Tan, are you ready?
Yes, I am. I hope.
Very good, very good. Thank you. So now is floor yours, please.
Thank you. Well, I'm very sorry about this technical stuff that was happening here, but I hope that everyone can hear me now. Dear participants and colleagues, partners, I'm very happy to greet you today, and I'm very happy to present to you about what is happening in Uzbekistan in the Ecc sector, and how it is developing. And Uzbekistan is a country which currently undergoes major reforms in all areas. Can we move to the next slide, please? Since 2016, we saw the new president's determination to place focus on the education sector. With the growing population, and it currently stands at 34.5 million people, and the population is predominantly young. We have about 60% of our current population is young people aged under 30. And the number of children aged 3 to 6, which are our target age range, basically is 2.8 million. And it's constantly growing, taking the annual birth rate in Uzbekistan now is roughly around 800,000 children. So taking that into consideration, we see that there is a window of demographic opportunities opening up for Uzbekistan. And we see that this huge number of young people in 15 or 20 years will become the major driver for high and sustainable economic and social growth. And that is why it's not surprising that the government decided to use this early demographic dividend stage to invest in the human capital. And the government started with investing in the early childhood education and care. So in 2017, in Uzbekistan, the Ministry of Preschool Education was established, and the age range that we are targeting is children aged 3 to 6. We have an exception for children with special needs, where we target children aged starting from the age of 2. One of the big reforms that we are pushing forward now is introducing 1-year free and compulsory pre-primary education for children aged 6. So it's 1 year prior to entering primary school. It was first piloted in 2019. And if we can move to the next slide, I want to also share with you how actually and why a separate ministry was formed. So if you know, Uzbekistan has a very interesting historical background. When the Soviet Union split, we saw that many preschools were closing down. First of all, there was a period when the birth rates were slowing down, and also when the incomes dropped. So not many children attended preschools. Many preschools were sold and converted into something else over the years. And basically the Ecc sector was almost completely forgotten. That was until the new president came in late 2016, And if you can see here, the trend shows that starting from 2017, the ministry was formed at the end of 2017, and you can see the growth in enrollment rates, the growth in the number of preschools. And for the first time, we basically broke that number that we had in 1991 when Uzbekistan gained independence. We broke this number in 2018. And from then on, we just continue growing. Next slide, please. This heavy focus of the government on the Ecc sector in Uzbekistan, it paid back. And you can see here that if we had the enrollment rate of 27% in 2017, it's actually more than doubled. And now, as of today, the enrollment rate in preschool education for children aged 3 to 6 exceeds 62%. So we now managed to enroll almost more than 1.7 million children. In 2019, we also got our concept paper for developing the Ecc sector in Uzbekistan approved by the government. And based on according to that concept paper, our target for 2030 is achieving minimum 80% enrollment rate for children of preschool age. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to share a little bit how we managed to achieve these results. So if you can see from here, the total number of preschools more than tripled if we compare it against 2017. And the number of preschools, the growth in the number of preschools was primarily driven by the growth of non-public preschools. And I will tell a little bit more about this in later slides. That was due to introduction of new forms of preschool education, also introduction of public-private partnership in the Ecc sector. We also introduced a new form, which is a family-based kindergarten. And what we created to motivate and stimulate private capital to enter this sector we provided certain benefits. We provided soft loans at very low rates. Basically, during the first 2 years, the government provided 1% loan to those entrepreneurs who wanted to open PPP preschools, especially in rural areas. So family-based kindergartens, for example, they also receive subsidies from the government, and the government also subsidizes the wages of the staff that is employed by family-based kindergartens. But we also managed to grow the number of public preschools, but that was primarily by building new preschools across the country. Next slide, please. And talking about the one-year compulsory education, if you can see, before we started this program in 2018, less than half of 6-year-old children were enrolled in any type of preschool education program. Starting from 2009, when we first introduced this one-year pre-primary education, we managed to enroll 69%. And that is including both services that are paid for by parents, full-day services, half-day groups, and also free half-day groups which do not have like meals, which do not provide meals. So basically, these 3-hour a day, 15-hour a week programs, they are completely free for parents. And that way, we managed to achieve, as we speak today, a 77% enrollment rate of 6-year-olds in pre-primary education. And our target for this year is to achieve 82%. And this year, the government allocated 158 billion soon for achieving this target. And we Our objective is to achieve 100% enrollment of all children of at the age of 6 years in this 1 year pre-primary education by 2025. And in 2027, all schools will only accept children who have gone through this pre-primary education. Next slide. Talking about teacher to child ratio, currently our maximum class size is established at 30 children in general type preschools, and we have 2 adults in a classroom, which is a teacher and teacher's assistant. So the current ratio is roughly about 15 children per an adult, per teacher. But for preschools for children with special needs, the maximum class size is lower. It can go as low as 10, maximum 10 children per class. But what we can see is that definitely this child-to-teacher ratio will not fall. It will remain high for the next years due to the great demand. As you can see, we have extensive growth in the number of preschools, and we have a great demand for teachers, and the supply is limited. But if we go to the next slide, we can see that we have managed to grow the number of teachers. It's more than doubled, but still we have a shortage of teachers. So we will not be able to cut the child-to-teacher ratio in the coming years. Next slide, please. Talking about the types of preschool education services that we have in Uzbekistan here, if we classify by the number of hours that children spend in preschools, we have full-day service and half-day groups. So full-day service is typically either 9-hour, 10.5-hour, 12-hour, or 24-hour groups. And we also have half-day groups. Half-day groups are also different. There are half-day groups which parents pay for their children to attend. Then in that case, we provide some light meals. And there are also half-day groups which are not more than 3 hours a day. And if they do not include meals, then they are completely and totally free for parents. If we classify them by the amount of money that your parents pay by the parental fee, there are services that are fully paid. So if it's a public or non-public preschool, so the parents have a fixed monthly fee. If there are also services where the cases where parents do not pay the full amount. This applies to public preschools and also to PPP preschools, where the government sometimes subsidizes the payment, and also it includes subsidizing parental fee partially for parents from households with low income or disadvantaged families. There are also free services, for example, like the compulsory 1 year pre-primary education, and also like new alternative forms of preschool education, like mobile groups. We have a new form like buses for rural and remote areas, where the bus comes to this remote area and provides like 3-hour a day preschool education. We also have playgroups also in rural areas, home visiting model that we are planning to introduce together with the World Bank, and also all preschool education services for children with special needs. They are also completely free for parents. And then if we classify by the type of preschool, we have general type preschools, and we have several preschools where we have children with special needs. There are specialized preschools for children with special needs who have like severe disorders. We have combined preschools like inclusive, where we have both children with special needs and also like let's say normal usual kids. And we also have a new form which is called special preschools. They are combined with the rehabilitation centers. And we also have separate groups which are usually attached to a preschool but not located in this preschool. This is what we use in remote areas. Next slide, please. So if we look here, we can see that if we look at the total number of preschools, the majority of them, 68%, is non-public preschools. The total number of public preschools currently is at 6,258, with the total number of preschools at 19,300 preschools. But again, non-public preschools, if you look at the right, then you can see that 86% of non-public preschools, they are basically family-based kindergartens, which are small. Until recently, they only could enroll up to 25 children, and only in June, with the new presidential decree, they were allowed to take up to 50 children in one family-based kindergarten. So thanks to the very strong support from the government, the PPP sector actually grew significantly from zero to what you can see right now. It's more than 12,000 PPP-based preschools. I'm talking about PPP-based and family-based. The private sector is relatively small. It's only 795 preschools. Next slide, please. Due to the affordability of public preschools and due to their size as well, the majority of children is enrolled in public preschools. As you can see on the left diagram, 75% of children enrolled in preschool sector, they are enrolled in public preschools, and only 25% attend non-public preschools. Next slide, please. So here we can see key stakeholders, which are identified by the law on preschool education. So the Ministry of Preschool Education basically is the main government body, is the main agency which is in charge of the Ecc sector. And of course, we have supervision and control from the Cabinet of Ministers, and there are other ministries and agencies who we interact with. And also there are certain works that are done together with local authorities. Can we go to the next slide, please? If we look at this chart, we can see that expenditure in education grew by more than 200% over these years, if we compare it to 2017. And the public expenditure on Ecc sector basically grew from 2 trillion to 7.2 to 7.3 trillion this year, which is like more than triple. It's more than 3.5 times growth. So we can see it was a stable growth, but can we move to the next slide, please? It hit the maximum in 2017. So you can see that the expenditure on education hit its maximum in 2019, right before the pandemic hit. So 6.6% of GDP was spent on education. And this year, it's projected to be at 5%. And after COVID-19, we can see that there was a slight drop. And if we look at the expenditure on preschool education, it starting from 2008, it's roughly around 1% and projected to be at 1.1% this year. Next slide, please. Yeah, so basically what we can see here is that preschool education accounts for about 21% of total education spending, and roughly about 5% in the total public expenditure. Sorry, yes. Next slide, please. So you can see the growth again. In 2020, you can see the numbers slightly going down due to COVID-19 again. But anyway, the total public expenditure of preschool education increased 3.5 times since 2017 when the ministry was established, and it exceeded 7 trillion this year. And the major portion is the current expenditure. Capital expenditure also slightly dropped due to decreasing budget income. But we can see that the current expenditure grows consistently due to, again, increasing number of children enrolled, and also due to the increasing number of preschools and increasing number of children, of teachers who are involved in it. Next slide, please. Just here wanted to show how the capital expenditure, how it resulted in increasing the number of preschools, and we had more than 1,200 preschools which were reconstructed or constructed using funds from the state budget, centralized funds from the state budget. Next slide, please. Again, talking about the current expenditure, here you can see by categories, and the major portion basically goes to finance salaries and salary related payments. Next slide, please. And here also you can see the same picture by years and also by category of spending, current expenditure. And the next slide, please. Oops, I think we need to go back one slide back. Yes. So here we can see that 60% of the current expenditure over the last 4 years was basically spent on salaries and salary related payments, and about 26% on to supply different like, for example, textiles, meals, and buying sanitation and cleaning materials. Next slide, please. So we have like target cost indicators in 3 areas. The first one, as I mentioned previously, was a special program for stimulating PPP-based preschools, which includes subsidies, soft loans, etc. The second one was the program to enroll 6-year-old children in 1 year of free and compulsory preschool education. And third program is the annual program for construction and reconstruction of public preschools. Next slide, please. Our scheme of financing is also a bit complicated. There are certain deficiencies, we understand that, and we are planning to make certain changes to how the scheme works. But currently, the Ministry of Preschool Education submits annually like inquiries and requests for receiving budget allocations, and usually these inquiries, they include what we need to submit to the Ministry of Finance is the analysis of past year results and what we expect to achieve in the current year. We also need to indicate the list of financial obligations, so what categories we have to finance, and also we need to submit our development program. Then the Ministry of Finance usually tells us you have this amount of approved limit and to spend this year, and then based on that limit, usually very often it's lower than what we request, and the Ministry of Preschool Education then will have to adjust the inquiry in accordance with the approved limit, and then we place a budget request. And then as you can see the flow here, usually then all these expenses are included in the law on state budget every year. Can we go to the next slide, please? So we have like costs basically financed from different sources. The central budget, the state budget, finances capital expenditure, which is construction and reconstruction. Also subsidies for PPP-based preschools, family-based preschools, and also salaries of employees of public preschools. And the local budget takes upon itself financing other expenses related to the maintenance of state preschools. So it's like current repairs, buying sanitation goods, different stuff for stationery for preschools, and also they finance meals. And what I want to stress here is that if you look at it, the education service itself in our preschools is free. What the parental fee covers is basically the meals. But even then, if you can see here, the parental fee on average covers about 54% of the cost of this meal, and the local budget then additionally supports like 46% of the cost of this meals. Next slide, please. So there are definitely, as I mentioned previously, our goals are quite ambitious, taking into consideration our rapid demographic growth. We trying to catch up with this demographic growth, and building new preschools basically takes time and takes a lot of financial resources. That's why we're trying to close this gap by finding other alternative ways to create new places to increase the capacity of existing preschools. So that's why what we at the Ministry of Physical Education are trying to do and try over the past couple of years is to introduce various alternative models and stimulating PPP in order to mitigate the risk of not meeting our target enrollment rate numbers because of the shortage of funds. So the alternative models basically allow us to make it to do it faster and at a lower cost for the state budget. So alternative models are predominantly not full day services. And but another thing about them is that if we provide like half-day services, as I mentioned earlier, we try to make them free of charge for parents, especially if meals are not provided. Next slide, please. COVID-19 definitely impacted, had a huge impact on Ecc sector in Uzbekistan. We could see the decrease in public expenditure on education overall and on Ecc sector as well. We saw that households' incomes also dropped, and there were some families that were unable to pay for preschool services. That's why we at the Ministry of Preschool Education, when we try to address the issue, when we try to extend the number of alternative models to make it more affordable for any category of families. And we could see also decrease in profits in non-public sector. And for example, when we talk about PPP preschools, the majority of them, they received loans from the government to start a business. So we saw that last year they were unable to repay the credit. So we allowed them to extend the grace period and provided other support. And of course, when we saw that the funding from the state budget decreased in 2020 when COVID hit, but at the same time, one of the challenges was that the costs continued to grow, especially when we talk about capital investment. Again, we try to support most disadvantaged families and provide subsidies and from the government, providing discounts for parental fees, providing free services, We also provide non-public sector. We had a new presidential resolution in June this year, just 1 month ago, to support non-public sector, especially in rural areas where the services are most needed. And we are finding alternative ways, and in that sense, we closely work with our international partners as well, for example, UNICEF and the World Bank. Next slide, please. Key takeaways is definitely what affects us in achieving the targeted enrollment rates is our growing population, very high birth rates. And we definitely see that alternatives forms of preschool education can be a savior here for Uzbekistan in order to maintain growth of the Ecc sector with low budget costs. And we're trying to introduce new financing schemes, for example, per capita financing, voucher system, and gradually introduce, gradually decentralize the financing system. Definitely, I would agree with my colleagues what they said yesterday and today. We need good and reliable data. We have an information system in preschool education, which is called EMIS. And we also have an information system at the Ministry of Finance, which is called Uzbekistan. So we need to put this systems in place in terms of so that they could meet our needs, and we need to have this integration. And I would totally agree and support Dr. Moon's message here that the political will is really key, because we would not be able to achieve what we have achieved without this strong support from the government and from the president himself. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jelena, for this very interesting and very inspiring, once again, the presentation. I know we are very happy to see the inspiring experience from the Ecc experience from our region, from Uzbekistan. We know that, you know, Uzbekistan is one of the champion in the Ecc in this region. I mean, I will say the next Ecc Ministerial Forum will be organized in your country in next year also. And very happy to see that, you know, there is a significant increase in the Ecc expansion same from the 2015 and now. So, and then also that's what exactly we would like to see. And also also you are trying to achieve all the targets we have committed also. And then at last point, what you mentioned, in which the political will are also very important, as you know, all our participants has been expressing one way or other. This is the kind of the fundamental to me that to make a significant invest in the Ecc also. And that is one of the reasons why we would like to do to provide our policy maker and planner for the systematic evidence, so that they can we can able to convince, we can make an informed decision also. So now we have three presenters from the two country experience, as well as from the regional perspective from the UNESCO Bangkok initiative. So now it's time for the Q&A. Now, so perhaps maybe in my Q&A chat box, I have two questions. So let me ask the point of this question. The first question is, due to the COVID-19 situation, the participation rate of Ecc students are decreased in most countries. What are the strategies to enhance parents' awareness to send their children to Ecc centers? So maybe address to the three presenters who would like to volunteer. So the question is, what will be the strategy to really promote or to sensitize or to make awareness to the parents so that they will send their children to the Ecc centers?
Maybe I can go first.
Yes, thank you, Christy. Yeah.
Based on learning from other crises, show that the risk of dropout is significantly high for vulnerable groups. So learning from past experience, I think these are some activities we can follow. For example, there we can have an introductory webinar for parents and a virtual tour for students and parents to see the schools, and also have a community outreach program through email, text, and phone call, and wherever the communication method possible, to ensure the parents understand the importance of enrolling their children to pre-primary education, and also targeted messages for vulnerable groups, especially girls and the children with a disability or children from ethno-linguistic minority. And also the government can provide a conditional cash transfer and stipends or scholarships for families and children in need. And also provide free school meals for families and children, so they can attend, and then it's an additional benefit for them to enroll the school. And also school or community can organize community outreach program, like regular one-to-one visits, check-in from the teachers to the parents, and also visit directly to the student families, so that they can understand what's the situation with the children, so that they understand what's the real barrier for them not enrolling to the school program. Over to you, Nini.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you. Yeah, it's well articulated. Now I have another question. Probably I would like to address to the Madam Yelenas, because this there's a question more addressed to this country specific. Say that one concern in the national government sector is that there is no specific office collecting the needed data for the SDG food target 4.2 indicator. So some data are collected by program departments, some other departments, some other ministry, and so on and so forth. So do you think it is advisable to have a one specific department or unit in the ministry collecting all indicator for SDG 4.2? Or if you think yes, what should be the composition of the staff for that unit? So it's a more very much down to the hard and practical. So perhaps maybe I would like to request Ms. Yelena whether she would like to respond or not.
Yes, Nini, thank you for the question. We have a dedicated department who collects data. We have a statistics department under the main department at the Ministry of Preschool Education. And we also have the special center under the Ministry of Preschool Education, which manages the Education Management Information System, the EMIS, where all data also are input by all preschools and both public and non-public. And where we can see also how, and using this EMIS, we can also track some indicators.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now I have another question, which is very specific to the Madam Dr. Mung, because it is a very interesting presentation Dr. Mung has presented and sharing about the Korea experience. And during your presentation, you mentioned about the KG and also early childhood care. We call it, you call it CC. So we would like to do the question is what is the difference, similar or different between KG and early child care in the relation about in relation to the staff norm or learning environment or maybe including staff child ratio, etc., or our school readiness. But does the child age 3 to 5 attending KG or CC have different characteristics? And then also, do both streams adequately prepare for primary school? Why choosing KG over CC? Or could you explain to share your experience?
A very good question. To me, I think there are, of course, some differences, but much more similarities. Since because of the increase of the working mothers, actually, originally these kindergartens and child care centers has different the motivations for their establishment. The kindergarten was the purpose was for the education in the early years, and the child care was just providing care while mothers work. So, but since the mid 1990s, there are a dramatic increase of the working mothers. So now the functions of the kindergartens and child care centers are pretty much overlapping and then become much more similar. So, but as you saw in my slide, these are the split system. So we have different the administrative auspices and also the teacher training, and then also and blah blah blah. So many things are splitted. Only for the NURI curriculum for 3 to 5, that was the flagship initiative to integrate, consolidate for the kindergarten and child care centers. So now we are trying to reduce the gaps, the quality gaps between these kindergarten and child care centers, and probably the decrease of the population. So I think eventually by the parental choices, maybe I think these two institutions will be consolidated in the end.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mo. It's well explained, and thank you very much. Now let's go to another questions. This is more about the more technical question from the floor, and then it said that in addition to pupil teacher ratio, do you include other factor contributing to quality ECCE teacher or ECC center service in the financing model? So perhaps maybe my colleague Christy or maybe my Masaya, would you like to respond? So a question, in addition to the pupil teacher ratio, what are the other factor you would like to include for financing model for the quality of this the model?
For our model, we also included teaching material per student, and also the cost for teacher training. And also we included the cost of school facilities such as playground to make sure it's safe and inclusive. So these are the quality measures that we included in our model. Nini, Masaya, if you want to add anything, yeah.
Thank you, Christy. Let me add, actually, that the model is a kind of projecting tool. I mean, we can include a lot of parameter. The key point here, I think, throughout our presentation and this seminar, it mentioned about the availability of the data and the quality of data. Maybe if we have it, we can further sophisticate it, and further include different parameter to make it more precise and more the precise projection or forecasting we could make it. But thing is, now our question is whether the information will be available or not. And then another issue we need to address it. That's we had discussed throughout the seminar. Another issue is the model focus is for twofold. It's the regional model as well as for the country specific also. So then the question is whether if we would like to include such parameter into the regional model, whether would it be sufficient enough for the country to provide such data. These are very important also. And then when we go down to the country specific model, the challenge will be there. How should we customize? Because the country are, I mean, there are common parameter, but there are some specific parameter we may need to take into account. So then the model, how robust we could make it for that model also. So that's a lot of technical question, but we are striking to further improve in collaboration with our headquarter colleague and then also our IIB colleague to further enhance this model also. So maybe before we conclude and pass it to the further the Janbo session, as we mentioned in the seminar, one of this seminar is to advocate and also to sensitize to get the systematic evidence for convincing our policymaker and planner to really invest in early childhood. And then this is very important, and all across we all agree on that. Now the question is, how do we convince? And that's one of the initiative we come up with it. Okay, providing this the first presentation Christy made. From there we can have it a lot of illustration to convince and advocate and to initiate the policy dialogue for our policymaker planner. So right now we have 3 countries are already on board, and you will see the Christie presentation, very interesting and very illustrative and policy oriented. The message using the case study of the Cambodia, and now it's also Bhutan and Kiribati are now coming on board, and also we would like to welcome other member countries to really join hands together, because this is not only for creating the tools and instruments, but also we would like to do the capacity development together also. We have a sufficient member country to work together, then also that will be very interesting, and also so the initiative we will be able to make it also. So with this, is there any more question? If not, we would like to open the kind of the questions like we did for day one, or for we have a 3 questions for request our participant to answer to further enrich the initiative, and also further better understand, and also to see the interest of your to know your interest also. So we would like to ask you 3 questions, and like we did yesterday in the gen board, and we would like you to be further put it in the answer. So Job, ready? Yeah. So we have a 3 question today also. First question, what are the key obstacles in increasing investment in ECC in your country? And the second question is also, you will see there, in order to make comprehensive decision making to strengthen ECC sector, what are the additional education, not only education, other socio-economic data or information we would like to need it, will be very helpful for us to really further, as you mentioned, further enhance the model. And then the last question, what are the key information that policymaker would consider or require in order to increase the government investment on ECC? This is how we should present, because you are the country persons, and you know better, you are the policymaker planner. If we provide the information and the data relevant to the policymaker, we hope that we'll be able to convince our policymaker to further increase the investment on ECC. So with the 3 questions, we would like to get got your idea, your thought, or your experience. So we will make it this up to, maybe now it's 3:30, so maybe 10 more minutes. Then up to 3:40. Sorry that that we now this today we are kind of overflow our section, but 10 more minutes will be there fair enough to do. Thank you very much. Yes. 3 more minutes. Now it's 3:40 p.m. in Bangkok time. So now time's up for the 10 minutes. So first of all, thank you very much for sharing your thought and idea or experience for the answering all these questions. It's extremely helpful to us. So what we will do, we will compile and we will reflect it, and also we will put it in our report so that others can share also. So with it, thank you very much for all the participants or the presenter for your interest in enriching PowerPoint presentation, and also the participants were very active and engaging your participation also. With this, shall we conclude? And may I pass it to Gigi? Gigi?
Thank you, Nini.
Thank you.
And
Yep.
thank you very much, all the speakers for their presentation, and also everyone for your questions, feeding this highly interactive discussion and your input to the Jamboard. To conclude, may I now request Miss Margaret Sash-Israel, the Chief of Section for Inclusive Quality Education at UNESCO Bangkok, for her concluding remarks and key messages. Margaret, over to you.
Thank you very much, Gigi. It's a great pleasure for me to be here and having listened to these very, very interesting presentations and also the exchanges afterwards. So let me start by thanking all of you, thanking the presenters for their really excellent, highly interesting and informative presentations, and all the participants for your very active engagement. But also would like to take the opportunity to thank my colleagues for organizing this webinar on costing and financing SDG 4 targets by 2030, in particular ECCE. As we know, this is a really burning issue. It is very timely and extremely relevant, in particular in the current situation, where we know that education budgets are cut, while at the same time, as we heard in various presentations, the needs for educational financing have risen because COVID-19 has led to additional requirements and demands. So we are actually in a situation where governments, because of the situation and because of loss of income nationally, are cutting educational budget, yet we know that there are needs. Actually, the seminar gave us clear numbers. Let me look at one. For example, we heard that it is projected that the annual cost of achieving universal pre-primary, primary, and secondary education in low and low middle income countries will increase from 149 billion in 2012 to 340 billion in 2030. And the figure is, the gap is even more important in ECCE. So while we heard also from many country presentations that fortunately, quality pre-primary education is clearly recognized as crucial in providing children with the foundations for further learning and to succeed in life. And then also general gross enrollment ratios have increased, but we've seen that ECC is really the most underfunded area in education across the globe. There are some good exceptions. So we have seen today from the quite impressive presentation from the Republic of Korea that has a very high investment in ECCE, even going beyond the OECD recommended benchmark. Also showed interesting policies and innovative practices, how it could be done. And we also heard from Uzbekistan, starting with a very strong political will to advance ECCE, the impressive progress made, and its ambitious goal to reach 100% enrollment by 2025. So we have these good practices, we have political will, we have innovative ideas on how challenges can be overcome, but yet we know that the global situation and also in the region looks very grim. So what we learned also from this seminar, and I think this is something that we can take away, is that in order to convince governments and ministries of finance to start with, to invest more in this crucial area, we need data and we need to have high quality and robust information on financing that can serve for advocacy to then undertake policy dialogue. So this can be done through the costing and financing models that have been shown to you, that can be customized. I think this is a very interesting proposal for you in your countries to then ensure that the data and the information on what is required to reach the target that every country has set in ECEE, but also in education as such, can be reached. What is required? We need to have the information to start with. So I think this is something that we would like to offer you, that you can continue to reach out to us, UNESCO Bangkok, to provide you with the technical support on how to do that in your country, because we will continue to work on this in the future. Lessons learned, I mean, you heard it, but I think it's just important to point it out again. Political will, political will, political will, yes, very important. Also, we've seen in Korea, it's really the high value of education as such that ensured, and same thing for Uzbekistan and other countries, that ensured that sufficient investment in ECC is undertaken. And then very targeted funding, which is really clear in the educational budget. Korea mentioned mandatory proportion of the education budget for ECCE. Another point which I found was very important is that we cannot rely only on the public sector, in particular in the current situation. So public-private partnerships are extremely important to boost further. And then, as we've seen in the entire presentation, whatever we do, it needs to be based on data and research in order to have robust planning. With that, I would like to thank everybody again, and let me just quote UNESCO's Director General Audrey Azoulay, in which she said in a speech in the Global Education Meeting 2020 that financing education is not a cost, it is our most crucial long-term investment. So thank you once again, and looking forward to working with you more in the future.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Margaret. On behalf of UNESCO Bangkok, we sincerely want to thank you all participants again who joined this webinar, the guest speakers, as well as those who joined us. So as a last part of this webinar, if you don't mind, we would like to request all participants to kindly fill in a survey as a form of feedback for improvement for future similar events. It will only take 5 minutes of your time. You can access this survey by copying the link provided as we speak from the Zoom chat box. As a reminder, before we close, all materials used during this 2-day webinar will be available shortly on the UNESCO Bangkok website. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to reading your feedback and see you at our next webinar. Have a good day and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.